Hello and welcome to this complete English learning session. Today we are going to dive deep into three extremely important and commonly used words in the English language. These words are conflict, fight, and dispute. At first glance, they may look similar, and many learners even use them interchangeably. But in real communication, each of these words carries a different weight, different emotion, and different context. Let me ask you something simple before we start. Have you ever been in a situation where two people disagreed, and you were not sure whether to call it a fight, a conflict, or just a dispute? Or have you ever read news where countries are said to be in conflict, but not in a fight? This confusion is exactly what we are going to clear today in a very simple, natural, and practical way. By the end of this lecture, you will not only understand the meanings of these words, but you will also feel confident using them in real-life conversations, academic writing, storytelling, and even professional communication. And to make things even more practical, we will go through 5 powerful and natural examples for each word, so your learning becomes permanent and usable. Let us begin our journey with the word conflict. Conflict is a very broad and deep word. It does not simply mean people arguing. It refers to a serious difference in ideas, interests, values, or goals between two or more sides. These sides can be individuals, groups, organizations, or even nations. But here is something very important to understand. Conflict does not always involve physical action. In fact, most conflicts in life are invisible. They happen in the mind, in emotions, in politics, in society, and in relationships. For example, a person may feel a conflict between what they want to do in life and what their family expects from them. That is not a physical struggle, but a mental and emotional one. Similarly, two countries may have a conflict over borders or resources, even if they are not actively fighting. Conflict is often long-term. It can remain unresolved for years. It is also often complex, meaning it does not have a simple solution. That is why you will often hear conflict in news, politics, psychology, business, and literature. Now let us make it very clear and practical with 5 detailed examples of conflict. First example, there is a long-standing conflict between the two nations over territorial borders that has lasted for decades without a final resolution. Second example, she experienced an internal conflict when she had to choose between a high-paying job in another city and staying close to her family. Third example, the conflict between tradition and modern lifestyle is becoming more visible in today's younger generation. Fourth example, the novel beautifully portrays the conflict between human desire and moral responsibility. Fifth example, workplace conflict between management and employees can significantly reduce productivity if not managed properly. Now pause for a moment and notice something. In all these examples, there is no physical fighting. There is tension, disagreement, and struggle, but not necessarily violence. That is the true nature of conflict. Now let us move to the second and more action-oriented word, fight. Fight is a much more direct, emotional, and often physical word. It usually refers to a situation where two or more people or groups engage in physical confrontation or intense verbal argument. Unlike conflict, which can remain silent or internal, fight is visible and active. When people fight, there is usually anger, reaction, and immediate action involved. A fight is often short-term compared to conflict. It starts quickly and may end quickly, but it can also have strong consequences. However, fight is not always negative. This is very important. In English, we also use fight in a positive and motivational sense. For example, we say fight for justice, fight for rights, or fight against disease. In these cases, fight means strong effort and determination, not violence. Let us understand fight through 5 clear and realistic examples. First example, 2 students got into a physical fight in the school playground after a disagreement during a game. Second example, the police intervened to stop a street fight between 2 rival groups. Third example, she had to fight hard against all odds to achieve success in a competitive industry. Fourth example, the boxer prepared for months before entering the championship fight. Fifth example, people must fight against corruption in order to build a fair society. Now notice the difference carefully. In fight, there is energy, movement, resistance, and action. It is not just thinking or disagreement. It is actual struggle. Now let us move to the third and very important word, dispute. Dispute is a formal word that refers to a disagreement between 2 parties where both sides have different claims, opinions, or interpretations. Unlike fight, dispute is usually not physical. And unlike conflict, it is more structured and often legal or official in nature. Disputes are usually handled through discussion, negotiation, mediation, or legal systems. That is why you will often hear this word in courts, business environments, property cases, and international relations. Dispute is controlled. It is not emotional like fight, and not broad like conflict. It is focused on a specific issue. Now let us understand dispute through 5 strong and practical examples. First example, there is a legal dispute between 2 companies over ownership of a patent. Second example, the family is involved in a property dispute regarding inheritance of land. Third example, the workers and management resolved the dispute through negotiation and agreement. Fourth example, there was a dispute over the final result of the election, which required official review. Fifth example, international trade disputes between countries are often resolved through diplomatic talks. Now at this stage, you might already feel the difference becoming clearer. But let us go even deeper so you can never forget it again. Think of it like this. Conflict is the situation of disagreement. It is broad, long-lasting, and can be internal or external. Fight is the action. It is physical, emotional, or verbal confrontation. Dispute is the formal disagreement. It is structured, specific, and often solved through rules or law. Let us bring all 3 together in one story so it becomes unforgettable. Imagine 2 companies competing in the same market. At first, there is a conflict between them because both want to become the leader in the industry. This conflict creates tension in pricing, marketing, and innovation. Later, this conflict turns into a dispute when both companies start arguing over patents and legal ownership of a product. Lawyers get involved, documents are reviewed, and formal claims are made. If things get worse, employees or representatives from both sides may get into a fight during a protest or confrontation. Now the situation has moved from conflict to dispute to fight. This is how real-life situations evolve, and this is why understanding these words is so important. Now let us expand your understanding even further with more natural and engaging usage in daily life. Conflict is often seen in families, politics, workplaces, and even inside the human mind. It is not always visible, but it is always present where differences exist. For example, a person may feel conflict between saving money and spending on enjoyment. A student may feel conflict between studying and social life. These are silent but powerful struggles. Fight is more visible. It appears in sports, competitions, arguments, protests, and survival situations. It shows effort and resistance. Even when someone says they are fighting a disease, it means they are strongly resisting it with treatment and courage. Dispute is more technical. It appears in court cases, business contracts, land ownership issues, and official disagreements. It is solved with logic, evidence, and negotiation, not emotion. Now let us reinforce your learning with another round of natural examples in a flowing way. Conflict example 1. The conflict between environmental protection and industrial development continues to challenge governments worldwide. Conflict example 2. He struggled with a conflict between personal ambition and ethical responsibility. Conflict example 3. Social conflict often arises when different cultural values meet in the same society. Conflict example 4. The story highlights the emotional conflict of a hero torn between love and duty. Conflict example 5. Political conflict can sometimes lead to major changes in leadership and policy. Fight example 1. They had a sudden fight over a misunderstanding that was later resolved peacefully. Fight example 2. The army was prepared for a long fight in difficult terrain. Fight example 3. She continues to fight for equal rights in her community. Fight example 4. The children stopped their fight after the teacher intervened. Fight example 5. Survival in difficult conditions requires the will to fight against nature. Dispute example 1. The dispute over water distribution between regions remains unresolved. Dispute example 2. The contract dispute delayed the project for several months. Dispute example 3. The two parties entered arbitration to settle their dispute. Dispute example 4. There was a dispute regarding the authenticity of the document. Dispute example 5. Diplomatic teams worked to resolve the border dispute peacefully. Now let us reach the final understanding that will make this lesson complete in your mind. Language is not just vocabulary. It is a reflection of human behavior. Conflict shows differences in thinking. Fight shows action and resistance. Dispute shows structured disagreement and resolution. When you speak or write English, choosing the correct word is not just about grammar. It is about meaning, clarity, and expression. If you use fight when you mean conflict, your message becomes too aggressive. If you use conflict when you mean dispute, your meaning becomes too vague. And if you use dispute when you mean fight, your meaning becomes too formal or incorrect.
Now you have a complete mental map of these three words. Before we end, remember this simple memory trick. Conflict is the mind and situation. Fight is the action and struggle. Dispute is the formal and legal disagreement. If you remember this, you will never confuse these words again. Thank you for staying till the end of this lesson. Keep practicing these words in your daily speech and writing. Try to notice them in news, movies, books, and conversations. The more you observe, the more naturally you will use them. With practice and awareness, your English will become not only correct but powerful, natural, and confident.